Today, I'm going to teach 4 holistic strategies to reduce blood sugars living with type 1 diabetes. Welcome to my channel. I'm Evan, and here I share how to end type 1 diabetes stress and live a life without limitations. And there's so much more that goes into diabetes management than just giving yourself insulin or counting your carbs properly. Diabetes impacts the whole person. It impacts the body. No one's given a manual for living with type 1 diabetes. You know, we get diagnosed and typically we see a doctor and we're given certain tools for managing diabetes, but there are a lot of missing links in the recipe because the recipe is never exact, and a lot of what we learn simply addresses taking care of diabetes. It doesn't address the person who has diabetes, because this is not a one-size-fits-all model. It shows up uniquely in each person. So for instance, the type 1 diabetes, how it shows up in me, Evan, today after 25 years of type 1 diabetes, is going to show up differently in each person. So it's hard to have an exact formula or recipe as often expected, like this is the dose that's going to bring blood sugars down this amount, and this is the amount of insulin that we need for 20 grams of carbohydrates. It doesn't work like that. There are infinite variables at play. And there's so much more that goes into diabetes management than just giving yourself insulin or counting your carbs properly. Diabetes impacts the whole person. It impacts the body, the physiology. It impacts a person's emotions, their self-worth, and their visions for the future. I started noticing that there was more to diabetes management, especially when it came to blood sugars. I guess, 10 years into my diagnosis, I was living a much healthier life. I was practicing a lot of yoga. I was paying more attention to what I was putting into my body. And A1C, or the average of blood sugars, that test that we all take that tells us how good we are or not so good, that began to be a major goal for me. And in order to get my A1C down under 7, I did achieve it, but I was experiencing a lot of low blood sugars. And in order for me to achieve it was actually creating a lot more stress in my life. So I began to recognize that the standard of medical care, what my doctors were seeing as a good number, were not necessarily reflective of the quality of my life. I was limiting what I was eating. I was obsessing about what I was eating. I was stressed out about what I was eating. And in addition to that, I was worried about my blood glucose fluctuations to a point where I was overcorrecting, and I think that had a lot to do with the lows that I was experiencing. So when we're given the instructions for managing type 1 diabetes, that's a disease-focused strategy. It's focused solely on a number. It's not focused on the person. And this is why there is a dire need for holistic strategies for blood glucose or blood sugar management when a person lives with type 1 diabetes. It's just not enough simply to say that the numbers are where it's at. It's about living wholly and fully without limitations. We need tools and strategies to help us break the cycle of highs and lows, to support the restoration of balance, to empower us to live in relationship with diabetes, and to understand our personal constitution. Type 1 diabetes management is not a one-size-fits-all model, and neither are you. Leave your comments below. What's your story with type 1 diabetes? I want to hear from you. What makes type 1 diabetes so challenging, in my opinion, is that it's a self-care disease. It's unlike any other chronic illness or autoimmune condition because it's so intensive, and everything that is required to ensure the overall health of a person living with type 1 diabetes, it's self-administered. Diabetes is non-stop, and it must be considered in nearly every decision a person makes throughout their day. So it's no wonder that about 1 and only 1 in 5 people with type 1 diabetes in the United States are achieving the glycemic or the optimal glycemic control that's recommended by healthcare professionals. And what's even more interesting is that this number has relatively stayed the same despite lots of technological advances with insulin pumps and continuous glucose monitors, that 1 in 5, relatively speaking, has stayed the same in the last 20 plus years, which leads me to believe that optimal diabetes control, improving the way that we, the person living with diabetes, is taking care of ourselves, the answer is not in that manual of it's all about the number. It goes so much deeper than that. It's about the person and how they're feeling and their self-worth and their ability to effectively and consciously implement appropriate decisions. According to Columbia University, people with type 1 diabetes are at a much higher risk of developing anxiety, depressive disorders, eating disorders, and that these disorders dramatically impact one's ability to fulfill self-care management that's essential when it comes to type 1 diabetes. And this management, largely speaking, is one's ability to maintain glycemic control, or the regulation of one's blood sugars. But as I mentioned before, A1C is not the be-all, end-all metric for perfect type 1 diabetes health. You could have a great A1C, but be limiting yourself in so many ways, not feeling like you have the freedom to eat as you please or to do things in your life that you would like to do because you're trying to constantly stay in between the lines. That is not quality of life. And because of this, there is a need for comprehensive and holistic management of type 1 diabetes. Something that considers the bio-psycho, social, and spiritual qualities of a person. I want to remind you that you are not alone on this journey. There is a whole community of people with type 1 diabetes out there who want to look beyond the standard of medical care. We do not deny that we need the standard of medical care to stay healthy. We need insulin. There is not anyone in this community that's going to deny that. But it's to say that taking insulin, counting carbs, and diabetes management, it's not enough to just do those things. We need to look much deeper at the person, and by looking at the person more holistically, this is going to improve blood sugar control and quality of life. So let me know, is this a new concept to you? Living more holistically with type 1 diabetes, managing blood sugars more holistically with type 1 diabetes. I'd love to hear your comments and thoughts. So I'm a yoga therapist, and my work principally is sharing the tools and practices of yoga therapy for people who have type 1 diabetes. And for those of you unfamiliar with yoga therapy, it is the specific application of yoga, its tools, practices, philosophy for the unique individual or a specific condition. So that could include postures, breathing exercises, meditation, visualization, chanting, and more to suit the needs of a person living with type 1 diabetes. Yoga therapy is holistic because it considers the whole person, not just a disease. It considers a person's constitution, personality, the way that they learn, their weaknesses, their strengths, and supports them along their journey. What's so amazing about yoga therapy, it's the power of self-regulation and self-awareness. It helps you become more attentive to your body, and it empowers you to change the way that you feel, so that you feel like you can be more in charge of your life and your health. Practices can help you feel better in real time. Let's say you just had a high blood sugar episode and it's affecting you both physically and cognitively. A practice might help you restore your energy and reduce brain fog, for instance. Practices can also support a person over the long duration of their life with diabetes. So practicing regularly helps to restore balance and to protect our body's important regulatory systems, reducing stress, improving digestion, and overall function. Let's take a couple minutes to practice. I'm going to put a timer on. 2 minutes. Starting now, let's breathe together. Notice that you have the power to change the way you feel. So my invitation is to close your eyes. Begin to breathe slowly and smoothly. Observe the inhale entering and the lungs expanding, the ribs stretching forward, sides and back. The exhale, the navel gently firms towards the spine, the breath leaves the body. Smooth, effortless breath. Resolve any tension that you may be experiencing, any tightness or strain, so that the breath is constant, easy, and there's no hurry. Pay attention to the feeling that the breath conducts, the feeling of ease. Ease in the body. Gentleness in the mind. Open your eyes. Leave your comments. 2 minutes. What are the shifts? Feel any different? What do you notice? Another way to improve blood sugar control holistically is through something called self-inquiry. I was taught by my teachers that yoga practice without self-inquiry is not a yoga practice at all. So just as we were breathing and paying attention to the breath prior to this, that helped improve awareness of the breath, improve awareness of how one feels in the body. These are all strategies to awaken an understanding of how a person is feeling in their body. And when they are able to sense how they feel in their body, they can begin to inquire about other things going on. So for instance, with more clarity and awareness, one can begin to reflect on patterns in blood sugars, noticing habituations. Well, let's say for instance, a type of food that you're eating is constantly spiking your blood sugars up a couple hours later. Having that extra sense of awareness begins to allow a person to reflect and inquire, well, why is that? And what can I do differently? Maybe it's taking insulin earlier, or eating less of that food, or eating that food at a different time of the day, or not eating it at all. What can I do differently, whether that's reducing something or adding something, to make more positive changes? We could look at this in more of a psycho-emotional level as well. When there's blood sugar deviations, whether they're high and low, there are often emotions that are associated with that. And anytime that there is an emotion that doesn't feel good in the body, there's often a response as well. And my teacher says that emotions are sensations plus memory in the body, and we all have a life history that's full of sensations and different memories, especially when it comes to diabetes. And a lot of times those memories are not always positive ones. So our ability to inquire and ask ourselves these potent questions: what is it that I'm feeling? What are the thoughts? What are the emotions? What are the actions that are associated with that? Gives a person that extra leg up and the opportunity to be in greater relationship with themselves and their diabetes management. So a basic self-inquiry thing you could do is to look at your blood sugars over the last 24 hours and notice if there's like a time in your day that is consistently maybe out of range, or an area that you'd like to improve upon. And to ask yourself, well, with my discernment, with my awareness, what can I guess is the cause for this? And what can I do differently? And sometimes, honestly, we don't know what the cause is, but we can infer it or we can guess it. And from there, we can use a process of deduction to change different things. So seeing it more as a science experiment than anything. The third step for improving blood sugars with type 1 diabetes holistically is implementing Ayurveda into your lifestyle. You know, Ayurveda is the sister science of yoga. It's a science of health that incorporates a lot of different nutritional factors, but it's more than nutrition. It's more than what you're putting in terms of food, which is really important to our health. It's about how we live in relationship with nature, and within the nature that exists in ourselves that manifests like as a constitution. So when things are out of balance, according to Ayurveda, that is the precursor to the disease process. But applying different types of lifestyle practices that promote balance
can help us reduce the effects or even reverse the effects of disease. Now, we have type 1 diabetes, so there's no cure for this, but the only cure is the one that we have in our minds and our ability to live a healthy lifestyle in relationship to type 1 diabetes. And something I love
so much about Ayurveda, what it's taught me personally, is how to shift that mindset from the things that I'm doing, like my diabetes management things that can be quite tedious and tenuous at times, to shift my mindset of that being a chore to a reverential act of self-love, and making that shift in your life. It changes the whole feeling behind it. Like, if it feels like a chore, it's heavy and burdensome. But if it feels like an act of self-love, well, there's an infinite reservoir of inspiration that can come from that, when it's coming from a desire for health. But more than that, like an understanding that health is self-created, and that living in harmony requires a lifestyle shift and something that's never going to end. And so when we can let go of that one day somehow it's going to get easy, and shift it into everything that I do is intentional and meaningful, that changes the whole process. One basic thing that I do to bring Ayurveda into my life is eating seasonally. So right now when I'm filming this, it's the height of the winter. So I notice how my body needs different things. I need things that are lighter, that are easier to digest. I bring more warming spices into my foods that help my body's digestive process increase. I might actually start doing different types of exercise to bring more heat into my body because it's so cold outside. Things that I wouldn't do in the middle of the summer. So Ayurveda teaches us how to live in relationship with the seasons, within our own constitution, and to apply different practices that are going to support balance on a holistic level. And the fourth thing that improves blood glucose levels holistically is education about diabetes management. Go figure. But it's becoming very, very curious about what diabetes is, and really understanding it from a biological and a psychological standpoint. And when you start to inquire more about what is this disease, what's going on, why do I have this, what am I feeling when my blood sugars are high and low, what's happening inside of my body, it sparks a whole different kind of interest. And personally for me, what I've found is that the more I learn about diabetes, the less I understand, but at the same time it is just increasing my sense of self-empowerment, because I recognize that although I might not know everything, I know a lot more than I did before. And that unto itself helps me feel more efficacious to experiment with different things. When I can experiment with different things, it's like when you fall off the horse and you can get back on again. It just allows you more freedom in your life, and to not solely rely on doctors and specialists to be telling you exactly how and what you should be doing. It makes you the authority in your healthcare. And it's not to say that we do not need these people, because we need a team of people helping us and guiding us, but it allows us to have a greater relationship with diabetes and with those healthcare providers, to ask them the right questions as well. If you want to know more about type 1 diabetes, about how yoga therapy can help you know yourself better, I am here to help you I have got lots of educational materials out there on my YouTube and my Instagram, so check them out and begin to educate yourself in a different kind of way. So the 4 ways that a person can begin to support their blood sugar control more holistically is a 4-tiered process. Yoga therapy, the tools and practices, psychology and philosophy of yoga applied specifically to type 1 diabetes, the different postures, breathing exercises, meditation, chanting, and more to help self-regulate and increase self-awareness. Self-inquiry, this is the part of a person's practice, their lifestyle, where they're looking at their diabetes patterns, they're looking at their thoughts, emotions, actions, and asking themselves, is this helpful, is this harmful, what do I notice, what's coming up? And what happens over time is we begin to identify patterns and triggers as they're arising, or even before they're arising, where we can begin to either make changes, go along with them, or not go along with them at all, so we have more control over our lives. The 3rd is Ayurvedic lifestyle. This is living in harmony with nature, outside of us, inside of us, living with the seasons, the time of our life, living in harmony with our constitution, and applying different types of strategies that are going to reduce the effects of the disease process to support us with our health with type 1 diabetes. And the 4th is education, understanding diabetes, understanding yourself, becoming the person who's driving. There's this analogy in yoga, is like you are the person who's driving the chariot. You want to be the one who's holding the reins, not the horses driving you. And education is huge with this. This way we can begin to be the ones who we are relying upon. We can ask our healthcare providers the right kinds of questions. We can make discerning decisions. We can be in charge, because the fact of the matter is diabetes is not going away anytime soon, so we need to be the ones who are in charge. Bottom line, we're the ones who get it. If you've enjoyed this content, please like this video and subscribe to my channel. With your help, we can begin to help spread this message of living holistically with type 1 diabetes and empower others. I'm at your service. Thank you so much. Namaste.